going. And then when the numbers got bad, that seemed to disappear. And then we couldn't even get the data anymore. So I look forward to actually finding ways to be able to have everybody has the ability to be able to see some of this data as well on it. There's a reason that the DHS secretary is the very first week of nominations. This is a really important role, and it is a nonpartisan role. It is a national security role. And we're grateful that you've stepped into this, but it is important that we actually get you on the task to be able to make sure that's out there. You mentioned earlier in your testimony that we do have a morale problem at DHS right now. And I think a lot of that is because people that signed up to be federal law enforcement to be able to protect the United States of America have felt like they've been sidelined and they've not been able to do their job that they really signed up for. And what I'm hearing from you is you're going to allow them to do their job again. What has been historically true for a long time, that federal law enforcement is there to actually help protect the country and the citizens in those communities, that you're going to allow them to do that, and that's helpful. So I have two quick things that I want to be able to mention on this. One is right now, just in the structure of this, and we can talk about this at a different time, but CBP facilities that are along the border are really run by a different entity. Their facilities, somebody who lives 3,000 miles away and who doesn't actually do Border Patrol work, they actually design and oversee their facilities. That's a problem that we've got to be able to fix. So we've worked to be able to give more flexibility to CBP, that when they have difficulty and challenges there, they have the ability to be able to make those changes. But I'm not going to ask you to make a commitment to this because this is just one of those detail areas. But will you commit in the future to working with us, that this committee and you can work together to be able to figure out how the folks that are on the field can actually make decisions about the facilities they work in?
Yeah, Senator, I commit to working with you on that issue.
It's terrific. And then I had a constituent in Oklahoma that's a hunter, like you are, like I am.
Yeah.
He had a bag that he had some additional rounds that were in his bag that were left over from a hunting trip months before. He packed his bag, went on a vacation trip overseas, went through security with his bag. When he got overseas and then left and came back, they scanned his bag and said, "You have bullets, you have rounds in your bag." And he had, I think, 5 that were in his bag that he didn't even remember were left over in an outside pocket from a hunting trip before. Well, they promptly put him in jail and held him there and detained him there. Now, we worked through all the process to be able to get him back. My question is, that same bag went through TSA security in my state before it went through security overseas. And so one of the questions that I've asked is, why were those rounds picked up there and not here? Now, we don't have the full answer to that yet, but that's just one of those TSA questions that we need to have. Americans right now are on planes all over the country, and they count on a certain level of security when they go through that process. So in the days ahead, will you work with me to be able to identify what are the challenges that we still face with the screening process and to be able to correct those for the security of all Americans?
Yes, Senator, I will work with you on that. I was surprised TSA didn't come up more today, but that is a area in need of reform as well, and I look forward to working with you there.
Look forward to that. Thank you. I yield back.
Government needs a healthy dose of common sense, bullets in your bag. I had a guy with bullets in the back of his pickup truck coming back from Mexico. We arrested him and took his truck, and only because the Institute of Justice fought for him for 3 years did he get his truck back. I mean, that's crazy, the things we do. Let's have some common sense, and hopefully someone overseeing it will allow that. Senator Blumenthal, you're going to finish this up.
Thank you, Chairman Paul. I'm the last of your questioners, so that means I get unlimited amounts of time.
Okay.
Not really. Not even close. I want to sort of continue the emphasis on bipartisanship, and most especially on immigration reform. What this nation needs is comprehensive immigration reform. We know about the need for more H-1B visas and other kinds of extensions of the visa program that enable the United States to have more workers that are desperately needed in certain areas of our country. We know that there has to be better border security generally. We know we need to provide some kind of path to earn citizenship for a lot of the undocumented people in this country. And we know it's possible because we did it in 2013. The United States Senate, as you will recall, passed a comprehensive immigration reform measure overwhelmingly, it was bipartisan. I was proud to be a part of it going through.
You have a message.
But obviously, it will involve Homeland Security, and I hope that we can continue, as Senator Langford was a part of the effort in the last session, to expand on those efforts and move forward on a bipartisan basis toward bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform. I want to talk to you a little bit about domestic terrorism, which we discussed during my previous round, and I know you've discussed it afterward, including not just migrant crime and radicalization by ISIS, which are a real and present problem. I also want to ask you about domestic terrorism events unrelated to groups outside our borders. We've seen a rise in anti-Semitism in this country. It has spiked beyond any prediction. And I want to know of your concern with anti-Semitist, racist events, Charlottesville, Buffalo, Pittsburgh. There's a shorthand for these violent terrorist acts against people in the United States.
Yes, Senator, I'm very concerned about what we've seen in this country as far as anti-Semitic violence that has happened. In fact, last year during our legislative session, I brought legislation to more clearly define it so that we could fight it in our home state. And I'm hopeful I can work with you to continue to do what we can to make sure that we are addressing this rising threat and not facilitating it in this country.
And I just want to make sure that when you say we're protecting Americans against terrorism, that we're protecting all Americans, including people in mosques, in churches, in synagogues, people regardless of their worship, their race, their background. We need to protect all Americans from anti-Semitism, racism, Islamophobia. I hope you'll commit to that effort.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Senator. And I look forward to working with you to do that.
In my closing minute and a half, I just want to call your attention to an effort that I've led to help reunite children with their parents, children who were separated as a result of the so-called family separation policy in the last administration. I have introduced a measure called Keep Families Together, not only to limit separation of families at or near ports of entry, but also the Families Belong Together Act for several Congresses to help bring the children, the kids who were victims of this policy and who still are not big back with their parents. I hope that you will support that kind of effort.
Senator, the Trump administration never had a family separation policy. They had a zero tolerance policy, which said that our laws would be followed. What I'm alarmed by is the over 300,000 children that went missing during the Biden administration. And when we talk about children and what they're potentially facing as far as victimization in this country and the trafficking that's going on, this administration's lack of desire to find out where those children are or what they may be going through is alarming to me. So I want to stop that.
Because my time is expiring, I'm just going to interrupt again with apologies to say, let's put aside.
Well, I can't put aside 340,000 children.
Let's put aside what happened in the past. There are still 1,000 children who are separated and waiting to be reunited. I'd like your commitment that you're going to continue the effort to reunite them with their parents.
Senator, keeping families together is critically important to me and to this country. I'm concerned about Laken Riley's family, that they no longer have her. I'm concerned about the fact that we have people in this country that don't know where their children are, or people in other countries who sent their children here and they've been lost by this administration. So yes, my focus will be to keep families together. We will uphold our law and we'll make sure that we're doing everything we can to keep our children safe from the trafficking and the drug epidemic that's hit this country.
I'm going to end on an optimistic note and say I take that as a yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony. The nominee has filed responses to biographical and financial questionnaires
and alluded to misogyny being the reason that they weren't voting for Kamala Harris. I was highly offended by it. And I remember this, I think his name is Officer Tatum. He has his own podcast and stuff like that. And,
he's buddy.
you know, right? I remember how he was going off about that, and it's totally right.
And I didn't know what you guys were talking about, so I watched a little bit of the Dave Rubin clip, and in fact, Stephen A. Smith did say or mention and bring me up for the second time. And I'll just say this: if anybody knows Stephen A. and you see this video, I'm gonna message him on social media. I love to sit down and interview Stephen A. or we can go have a bourbon together. We ain't even gotta do no camera stuff. I do respect Stephen A. his transition, right? No, I'm not talking about his transition like like a transgender, but I'm talking about his transition into political awakening. Because at one point in time in my life, I was like Stephen A. Smith. And Stephen A. Smith is much older than me, and he had a lot more money, and so there's a lot more pressure for him to wake up and change. But I do appreciate the fact that I feel like he's honest about his transition for the most part. And I think that he's open to listening to other opinions, which gives him the ability to transition. But those of you who wanted to see this clip, if you haven't seen it, I thought it was very honorable. I think Stephen A. Smith is a pretty big deal, in my opinion. And he's one of those people that is good to have on our side, because smart people that have influence, that's telling the truth, is a win-win. Roll the clip.
I really thought, and I think I said it on my show like 2 weeks before the election, I was like, I think Stephen A. is going to vote for Trump. Was there just something else that was just a roadblock?
Let's call it what it is. There's a lot of people that won't admit this. I'm going to admit it. I was a bit misinformed. Let's call it what it is. I'm going to tell you when my mind almost changed. I had already voted down here when Barack Obama spoke to those black men in Pittsburgh and alluded to misogyny being the reason that they weren't voting for Kamala Harris. I was highly offended by it. And I remember this, I think his name is Officer Tatum. He has his own podcast and stuff like that. And,
he's a buddy.
you know, right? I remember how he was going off about that, and it's totally right. I was like, the nerve. Because, wait a minute, you go on The View and they ask you, is there anything...
You have a message.
That you found wrong, anything that you would do different? You can't think of anything? With 12.5 million people crossing the border? Really? You can't think of anything. You see homeless in the streets. You can't think of anything.
You have a message.
I know you didn't want to throw him under the bus, but when that happened, and then Barack Obama spoke to black men and said that, I was so insulted. Had I not voted already,
wow,
I might have voted for. That's how pissed off I was.
Did he just say I red pill him? Is that what he said? Did I have an influence in Stephen A. Smith's awakening to a certain degree? He did say he was mad, but he did end up seeing my commentary.
Whatever happened to disagreeing without being disagreeable, President Obama? What happened to that? All of a sudden, we want to challenge men and our love and our affection as black men for black women. We want to bring that into question because we've got an election coming up and people may have the temerity to think differently than you. It's because she's a woman that she's in danger of losing this election? Is that what we're saying? Is that what we're saying? It's a rhetorical question because it makes no sense to me. Is it possible that it's policy as opposed to misogyny? Is it possible that they've looked at a Democratic Party that is locked in on addressing or not addressing immigration and folks crossing the borders illegally, and have prioritized focusing on that along with other issues, identity politics and beyond, that has become such a focal point that has turned off folks in the African American community? Some, not most, not all, just some.
Why not you though, Stephen? How you keep exempting yourself from logic? You make a compelling argument about how all this stuff is wrong and how black people are moving away because the Democrats are doing this, and it's not you. I understand, bro. You got a large black audience and they pay you, you got this contract, and you're probably looking at the numbers, and large percentage of per capita people that watch you are black. Stop it already. There ain't no reason for you to vote for a Democrat, Stephen A. Not one reason. So I don't know. Y'all make me be the judge. Do you think that I had anything to do with Stephen A. Smith's gradual transition to realizing that the Democrats are fraudulent fools and they've been defrauding the black community forever, and they just got exposed this time? I've been saying this. Candace been saying this. A bunch of us black conservatives that woke up have been saying this for a very long time. These people, when I went back and did research, because I'm the type of person that says, and I'm manic about this. I'm up all night thinking about this stuff. When somebody challenges me on something I never thought about before, I don't immediately respond. I go look it up. And it's exhilarating to me to look up stuff because I'm like, oh shoot, like it's cool that I never knew this. And when I was being challenged by some of my friends on the police department, especially on the SWAT team, and they would challenge me about my position as a Democrat, and they would say stuff, and I was like, I didn't even watch that. If this guy's telling the truth, that's a big. If Barack Obama said what he said, that's a problem. And I'm not gonna overlook it because I don't know none of these people, right? I don't know none of these politicians. They don't pay my bills. I ain't got no kind of loyalty to none of them. And then I go and look it up and I go, he did say the Cambridge police officers were acting stupidly. Wait a minute, I saw that video and the cops didn't do nothing wrong. The guy was breaking in his house and the neighbor didn't recognize him, so the neighbor called the police and the cops were like, hey man, just show us your ID so we can make sure that you say that it's all good. I'm a professor, and the dude lied about the cops until the body camera came out, and he didn't even check. Michael Brown, they sent the DOJ and people to his funeral. I knew when I first saw it was a lie. Bro, you ain't gonna apologize for that? I put the uniform on every day, and now people coming at me. Oh man, y'all ain't nothing. Y'all kill Michael Brown and all these black people, and people hating us more because this fool is up there saying crazy stuff with no repercussions. I said I can't support that, man.